G'day mate, 40 here, hanging out at Shelley Beach in Manly, and I've been watching the World Cup. And remember how Russia's about the worst nation out there, and with Putin's new restrictions, that Putin's Russia is now approaching Nazi and Stalinist levels of terror. And that's what I'm hearing from our elites, and yet Russia held the last World Cup, did it not, in 2018? And they were nowhere near the crazy kinds of restrictions and interference with the press, and limits on where you could go, and limits on what you could say, and limits on photos you could take, right? So Russia was just like any other first world nation for the 2018 World Cup. But 2022 in Qatar, all sorts of ridiculous restrictions being imposed. Seems to be emblematic of how primitive, repressive, medieval the Arab Islamic world is, and how far it has to go to catch up to the rest of the world. So, very disturbing story I found in the Washington Post, guys. Not sure if you realize this, but for the LGBTQ community, shooting wasn't first instance of hate in Colorado Springs. This blew me away. I thought for sure it was the first instance of hate. But apparently they'd experienced hatred before. My God. So they equate this shooting with other examples of hatred. Club Q was Diamond Kobylinski's first gay bar. Right, so this is Diamond is presumably male, female, trans. They tried out drag as a teenager, dancing and lip syncing. Is where they came for their first drink. That's nice. Where they rang in birthdays with their adoptive family, a lesbian couple that took them in after a childhood in foster care. Yeah, you'd think hate didn't date back very far, but then you read this shocking headline, absolutely, in the Washington Post. This was their chosen family of bartenders, their drag performers, and other upstanding members of the LGBTQ community who gathered at Club Q in Colorado Springs. Now it's become a crime scene. And this has forced Miss Kobylinski to ponder just how integral this venue for queer life has been. It's a beacon in a place once known as Hate City. Right? Did you know that Colorado Springs was known as Heart City? Club Q was my everything. Safe space is a number. That's the biggest shock. It meant something. This was a safe space. Okay. So let's say other communities tried to create their own safe spaces. So Catholics create communities where only Catholics are welcome. Jews create communities where only Jews are welcome. Blacks create communities where only blacks are welcome. Let's imagine whites create communities where only whites are welcome. Would that also be glorified as a safe space? Well, this is one of the only gay bars in Colorado's second largest city. So Colorado Springs, man, it is a hateful place. They only have a limited number of gay bars. Could you imagine living in a city that only has 5 gay bars? Just imagine how absolutely stultifying that would be. Did you know that Club Q was a welcoming haven for free expression? One of the capitals of American conservatism. Thank God for the left out there fighting for free expression. What's the all-in cost of an Aussie junket such as this, Luke? So the key to my Aussie junket is bludging off my friends and my relatives, right? So I'm not paying anything for rent, not paying anything for hotels. I just have minimal expenses. I'm just paying for my food, and that's it. So my plane ticket for direct flights was something like $2,100. Yeah, Milo was photographed with Kanye, so Milo's always where the action is happening. He interned for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and he's always, the next new thing in populism. So I spent about $2,100 for my plane tickets. And then I'm probably spending $25 a day for food. Let's say $20 a day for food. And I'm spending about $1 a day for public transport. And that's it. Excessive sponging. Yeah. Bludging is the Australian profession where you're living off other people. So when I tell people this in Australia, they say, well, that's what family's for, to bludge after. So anyway, this tight-knit LGBTQ community, they experience Club Q as a haven for free expression. Well, if you get to choose who you hang out with, you can have free expression. Like I have free expression when I go to an Orthodox synagogue. I can talk about almost anything at my favorite Orthodox synagogues. So you allow people to choose who they hang out with, and free expression just wondrously, miraculously appears. You don't even have to put any effort into it. But we destroyed freedom of association with 1960s civil rights laws. So now only sacred groups get to have safe spaces and freedom of expression. The rest of us have to put up with all sorts of unwanted diversity and unwanted restrictions on speech because we're not part of a sacred group like the LGBTQ community. Right? They get to have safe spaces. They get to have free speech. Wish the rest of us did too. Did you know that Colorado Springs was struggling to move past its label as ground zero for the evangelical push to limit gay rights? It's just a tendentious way of phrasing things, right? The evangelical push to limit gay rights, right, is a reaction to the incredible expansion of gay rights and the preservation of safe spaces for evangelical Christians. So who is this worse optics for, Milo or Kanye? I have no idea. I can't, Kanye doesn't make any sense to me. It's not someone I can relate to. Milo sometimes makes sense to me. I can't take either of them terribly seriously. But this notion that, right, Colorado Springs is ground zero for the evangelical push to limit gay rights. When you keep expanding rights, you hamper the rights of other groups, right? You expand LGBTQ rights, right? You're limiting rights for Christians. Yeah, they're helping each other circle the drain. Right, you expand rights for minorities. That comes at the expense of the majority. It's not like rights is just something that you can endlessly expand for different groups, and there's never going to be a backlash. Yeah, the mile-high air compromises thought processes. But just imagine they do this article in a headline for LGBT community, shooting wasn't first instance of hate in Colorado Springs. So essentially they're equating evangelical Christians trying to maintain their own safe spaces with this mass murder. Right? And we don't even know a motive for this attack. But this spurt of violence has punctuated a wave of rising anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and laws. So people trying to stand up for their own safe spaces, right, for their own religion, for their own communities, for their own way of life. All right, they are responsible for this spate of anti-LGBTQ violence. Right, for a city whose recent history has been sullied by 3 decades of political attacks on transgender and gay people over spousal benefits non-discrimination rules, and even the ability to start high school clubs, this felt like a punch in the gut. Okay, so I'm not sure that Colorado Springs history has been sullied by these things. So these are political attacks. Why is LGBTQ rights expansion not a political attack on traditionalists and heterosexuals? Right? Why is limiting the ability to start high school clubs and limiting the ability of grooming of kids? So these anti-bullying clubs are usually grooming clubs. Like, why is limiting the ability of groomers some spade of hatred? Spousal benefits. Okay, well, someone's got to pay for those benefits. If society doesn't recognize heterosexual marriage as special, then who knows what moral chaos will descend from that when you just dispense with millennia-old ways of organizing community and families. Right? We've never had a gay marriage before in human history until recently. You think you can just dispense with this and there are no dangers? So the LGBT community says we've made great strides. Right? These great strides have come at a tremendous price. Right? You would not have had the AIDS explosion. You would not have had the AIDS explosion if not for the expansion of LGBTQ rights. How often expanding rights for a group plays into many of its worst impulses, and it's not good for the group. Right? The backlash against police and policing since the murder of George Floyd has been really bad for much of the black community. It's led to an explosion of crime, an explosion of murder, explosion of pedestrian deaths and driving deaths as police have pulled back from doing their job. Right? The black community has suffered the biggest increases in murder and traffic deaths and pedestrian deaths. Should we purge anyone who makes a living off of victimhood and anything related to it? No, I just think we should try to limit it, limit the legal incentives to file victimhood lawsuits. I don't think you can have a group identity without a substantial element of victimhood. But we can shift society so that public expressions of victimhood aren't rewarded. Right now we're rewarding lawsuits of victimhood and public expressions of victimhood, and we can discourage that. So victimhood was a key part of group identity in the 1950s, in the 1850s, and the 1750s, just wasn't encouraged by society. So gay and transgender residents describe Colorado Springs as a difficult place to be out, some citing recent episodes of discrimination and hate crimes. Well, what about those who have a traditional understanding of life, trying to maintain that? Are they not suffering discrimination and hate crimes? Their traditional way of life is urinated on. So I'm not sure that it's the Jews who've mastered the quintessence of victimhood. I think it's pretty much Jews have taken their cues from blacks, and then blacks have taken their cues from Jews, then LGBTQ community and women have taken their cues from blacks and Jews. So I think everyone's gotten into the victimhood game. I think the pioneering group were African Americans, and then Jews took their cues from African Americans, though Jews also played a substantial role in the Black Civil Rights Campaign because they saw it as good for the Jews. So did you know that Colorado was once infamous for its anti-LGBTQ laws? Well, these so-called anti-LGBTQ laws were simply attempts to maintain freedom of association so that you could hire who you wanted, that you could rent out your property to who you wanted, that you could form the type of community that you wanted. So expansion of rights for one group comes at an enormous price for other groups. So Washington Post story from around 1990 says that Colorado Springs has developed a reputation for intolerance and venomous values-based politics. you can't have a safe space without intolerance. Right? Club Q is intolerant of any anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and behavior. Right? So one group trying to maintain its values will inevitably feel like intolerance and venomous politics to another group. So focus on the family. It's one of the largest, most influential groups to arrive Colorado Springs. It opposes same-sex marriage and promotes conversion therapy, widely discredited practice that purports to cure gay and transgender people. I don't know, is it really widely discredited? So plenty of therapists and psychiatrists have had success helping people who want to abstain from particular types of sex. It's not so much a cure, but it's a practical behavioral abstention. Right? They want to maintain their place in society. They want to maintain a solid family life, and so they want to maintain maintain their marriage by avoiding reckless promiscuity, going to bathhouses. It's underneath this always, says a queer studies scholar at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. The military, religious organizations, they are cultivating things that may inspire a place like Colorado Springs to be the next target of a mass shooting. Really? Now, we don't even know why this mass shooting took place. We do know that a judge let this guy out and he should be in prison. If we just locked up these super predators and kept them in prison, right, we wouldn't have these mass shootings. But apparently the presence of the military and religious organizations are there just bubbling up underneath the next hate crime. So important political movement came in 1992. Conservative activists rallied in support across the state for a ballot measure known as Amendment 2, which added a clause to the state constitution preventing municipalities from passing gay rights protections. Well, by preventing municipalities from passing gay rights protections means you maintain freedom of association for other groups, right? You maintain safe spaces for evangelical Christians and people who wanted to be selective in who they hired and who they rented to. So this vote was successful, right? The people voted for it. They approved the amendment, even as they voted for Democratic Bill Clinton. Then 4 years later, the US Supreme Court declared the amendment unconstitutional. So the people voted, democracy spoke, people wanted to maintain freedom of association, but that's all overruled by the courts. Great. Wonderful. People can say what they want, but in the end, the courts will rule. And they'll let you know what is permissible. Look at this wonderful lizard. Looks like a dinosaur, but smaller. Democracy for me, but not for thee. Yeah. Remember when we passed Proposition 187 in California? Jesus Christ. Is he going to eat me? Why is he approaching me? Do you think he'd bite me? Is he going to take a big chunk out of my leg? We're live on YouTube. I don't have any food. He's probably being fed too often by people. I don't think they're poisonous. Sure hope not. But come on, mate. So who's more scared right now? So there was a bigger one and a smaller one. It's our reptilian overlords. It's the lizard people. And as long as he doesn't come back with the bigger version. Welfare-dependent lizards. Snakes grew legs.
The Jewish Center Sanctuary in New York. It just shows how memory plays tricks with you. I lived on the Upper West Side for 4 years. I've been to the show countless times, but for some reason I
Get a little
had
Mark
thought
Shapiro
you see
in here.
the ark. You see the bima. It's on the stage there. I mean, where you daven, the bima is right in front of the Aron Kodesh. For some reason.
So the bima is kind of similar to the pulpit in Protestantism. It's where the rabbi speaks. It's where they unroll the Torah scrolls and read aloud from them. It's where the chazan, the cantor, leads the prayers. It's usually in the middle of the synagogue. And it's in front of the Holy Ark, the Aron Kodesh, where they keep the Torah scrolls.
Reason I was confusing it in my mind with Rome. Here's what Rome looks like. You can see it. They moved it down. It used to be that the bima was right in front of the Aron Kodesh, like in the Jewish Center, but a number of years ago they moved it so it's in front of the stage, I guess you could call that.
Oh no.
Yes, so I showed the picture here. But it just shows you how everything.
I've been there every week for the last 10 years.
Okay, well, I was also there. I lived on the Upper West Side, but it's been over 20 years, and it's just, I want to give you an example of how you always have to check, so I thank you. Because in my mind, I was remembering it as if the bima was in front of the stage, and it's not. And this is a perfect example of what we'll see the Rabbanim were speaking about when the bima was moved to the front, which is very church-like. Although, as we'll see, the Kesef Mishnah.
So the bima, the pulpit, in Judaism is usually kind of in the center of the synagogue. It's not up front like a pulpit. Yeah, the lizard heard the Jewish accent. Immediately associated it with affluence and food. Why is he coming on to me like this?
Doesn't see a problem with it at all. That's the first thing I want to mention.
Thank you. Thank you for that effort.
Thank you for the questions and the corrections. I always appreciate it.
It's one of those things that bothered me in that shul.
Okay, I quoted this book last week from Rav David Cohen. If you notice, his name is Cohen, but it's really Khan. He's not a Cohen. But in English, they write it as Cohen. He's a well-known rabbi in Flatbush, Osek, and I have to say, when the history of the sexual abuse issue is finally written, he will come out very well, because it does seem like now there's been a change, and at least not the elder rabbis, but like the younger generation, when I say younger, like in the 50s, early 60s of the Haredi world, is finally taking it seriously after it's already been a generation, decades. But it needs to be said that Rav David Cohen already decades ago was saying that you hear about sexual abuse, you got to go right to the police, and there were people who hated him because of that. And he was, there people said all sorts of bad things about him, but when the history is finally written, an honest history of how the Orthodox community responded to child abuse, it's going to be very hard to write the honest history, because the Aguda circles will not want to let their archives open, and what they did to prevent going to the police and things coming out. Rav David Cohen on this issue, say what you will about other issues, on this issue, he from the beginning stood up against his own community and was saying to do the right thing. So Yasher Koach to Rav David Cohen. I mentioned my name last week, Eli Melech, and I just repeated Melech. That's right, Melech, but people call me Eli Melech. It's not so. I repeated the story, the thing that everyone says, that the first Eli Melech is Eli Melech of Lezhetsk. And I said, check the Otzar Rabbanim. The Otzar Rabbanim is a book I have here, which it's 400 pages. It says that it lists every rabbi ever in history of any significance. So I looked at it, and it's not exact. I count 2 Eli Melechs, none of whom are at all significant, before Eli Melech of Lezhensk. So I think you need to say that from Rav Eli Melech of Lezhensk, then the name became popular. Not that it's first. And then I got an email also saying that from Mike and from Moshe. And he actually sends me an article. Here it is. Is that really true? And also it cites some examples from before. But so if we want to be exact, we could say that the name Elimelech did exist, but it wasn't popular. In terms of names, someone asked me, what do I have to say about non-Jewish names? We spoke about non-Jewish names as a Tshuva Ramosha about this. We've spoken many times about this, about the names like Tarfod and Papa, and even the name Maimon and others. So I don't need to repeat that, but I will say as well.
And the lizard is mimicking the behavior observed among homeless transient drug addicts. Loiter long enough, like the gives. Maybe he wants mushrooms. Is this an example of maladaptive survival behavior? Anyone not moving through the area might be there to fatten his belly. Maybe he sees me as a peer. Damn, this lizard is close. Doesn't he realize how dangerous I am?
This is what's interesting, which my daughter's name is Yael. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, so I'll say it. Rav Yaakov Emden states, I even printed it out, just I have for you. I don't want to check. It's Biras Migdal Oz, section Evan Bochen, section number 14. He says that Yael, even though she was a tzaddikim.
Okay, looks like an Australian water dragon. So how dangerous are these? Like, is my life at risk here? I don't like the idea of going eyeball to eyeball with a dragon. I watch Game of Thrones. That doesn't usually end up well.
Yes. Lo Haisa Yisraelis. He says that Yael was not Jewish.
So Yael is a character in the early books of the Bible who goes to bed with a Gentile general, Sisera, something like that, and kills him in his sleep. She seduces him and then feeds him, and then she kills him. Yeah. Damn, I hope this lizard's been vaccinated. Luke Ford, father of water dragons.
That's right. I don't know where he gets that. All the other sources assume she was. The whole discussion about Avera Lishma assumes she was, but Rav Yaakov Emden, for reasons I'm not sure if any of you can enlighten me as to why he says this. He doesn't say why. He actually repeats this in his Mikpachat Sfarim, which is his attack on the Zohar. He says that Yael, not only is Yael not a Jewish name, Yael was not Jewish. I don't think Jewish is not the best term in those days, so it was not Israelite, I guess you could say, because Jewish is from the tribe of Yehudah. But so that's what he says Israelite. So I find that unusual. And in terms of names, Robbie, thank you for writing to me. I have to, what Robbie says, I knew what Robbie said, but I forgot. I never pay attention to it. Robbie's Englishman. I've mentioned many times Cecil.
He looks well fed, doesn't he? Look at that enormous belly. Yeah, look how it's like, moving in and out with his breath. He looks very well fed.
Roth, and as any Englishman knows, it's not Cecil, it's Cecil, just like Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes. So I did know that, but what can I say? As an American, I just keep pronouncing it incorrectly. So I will try from now on to call him by his name, Cecil Roth, since that's how he called himself. Although we have plenty of examples of how we refer to people, not exactly how they called themselves.
Hold my hand out like I have food and see if he comes. No, I don't want to be touched by this creature. This creature scares me. Like, who wants to go eyeball to eyeball with a dragon? Oh, Jesus. Is he coming for me? It can move fast when it needs to.
The person who pointed out that in Hungarian it's temple for synagogue, I wanted to see if this still continues. So we're going to be seeing the Rabbi Oberlander, the Rav of Budapest, this Wednesday. And he says that although among the younger generation they're now saying synagoga, because they don't like to use her temple, he says his mother, he's from the Papa Hasidic group, she would still, he says, call it
No, I'm pretty sure lizards are not kosher. I just sense he's giving me the evil eye, but I sense that he can see right through me. I sense that, like, he knows who I am. He knows what I've done. He knows the things that I've said, and he's not happy with me. Do you get the sense he's not happy with me?
But templum. So I find that very interesting that in Hungary, that was one of the words they used for a synagogue. Oh, I have a few more minutes, so quickly I can say what I wanted to show you. And then I won't have anything else. This takes us back to last semester with Rav Moshe Feinstein and reciting Hallel on Pesach night. Lo and behold, I found Rav Moshe holds that he's very much against the Brisker Rav's position. He says, stay in the shul. If it's not your minhag, look, we're going to have this in 2 months. Stay in, say Hallel, but don't say it with the bracha. The Brisker Rav we saw, he's not into that sort of thing. If you're not supposed to say Hallel, don't say Hallel. Bracha, no bracha, you don't do it because it's you don't just do it. So he walk out. In this book, the Ma'anel Egrot, the attack on Rav Moshe. I can send anyone a PDF who wants this. You will not find this book on HebrewBooks.org. You will not find it on Moser Chachma. There's a boycott against this book, which I think is wrong. It's true the author is a Mechutzaf, and he speaks disrespectfully about Rav Moshe, but he makes many good points. It's full of learning. Rav Yosef quotes it. Every time he quotes it, he says that the author should have spoken with more respect to Rav Moshe. I understand when the book came out, it looks just like the Igros Moshe, the same publisher. In fact, when the printer was printing it, he realized what it was, and he called Rav Moshe, and he said, this is recorded in the biography of Moshe. What should he do? He has a contract, and he doesn't want to print it. And Moshe says, you can print it, but, because you lose money otherwise. So he printed it, but none of the foreign stores would carry it. I got my copy from the author himself. He's no longer alive, but I got my copy. But like I said, there's a boycott, which I think is wrong because it's a part of a Torah history. There's a lot of learning in it, and if we're going to start censoring, I understand because Rav Moshe is closer to our time. We knew Rav Moshe, but at the end of the day, if we're going to start censoring all the books that say disrespectful things, I just mentioned Rav Yaakov Enden. Forget Rav Yonasan Leibschitz. He says disrespectful things about lots of people. Are we going to start censoring the Torah literature? The Satmar Rebbe, what he says, Rav Shach. I mean, you can't start. I don't believe in cancel culture in the Torah world. So. But it's a collector's item, I can tell you that, and I do have a PDF of it because I think this Satmar guy made a PDF of it. But on Simon, I am Gimel, he goes against Rav Moshe. He's always going against Rav Moshe. Either Rav Moshe is too lenient or Rav Moshe is too strict. Rav Moshe can never get it right. But he has a whole tshuva here say that no, there's nothing wrong with saying hello, if it's not your minhag. If you're in a show where they say it with a bracha, you go ahead and say it with
This is great. We are cleansing our souls in the waters of Torah. We are refreshing our neshamas, our souls, here in the well springs of Torah from the good doctor, historian, Rabbi Mark Shapiro, hanging out at Shelley Beach, looking at is this an Australian water dragon? Just giving me the evil eye.
He says he has no problem. This is Rav Yom Tov Halevi Schwartz, the same author of this wonderful book called Eyes to See.
There's another one. See that big one?
In which he
Can
shows
you censor the frame? Much bigger one.
Eyes to See is the same one who wrote the Ma'anel Egrot, which, as I said, is unfortunate.
See the middle, the big one in the middle?
A very interesting book, nevertheless. And finally, a few more minutes. This I think you'll find interesting. At the end, we also spoke. It was the first class, I believe, in this series about violating Shabbos for non-natural remedies, and I think it was Bill mentioned that something about refined Heller and the Rav. I found it, but then and also Moshe sent me also. It's in Mipnei Harav, page 81 by Rav Schechter. It tells this great story from Rabbi Reese that once on some Torah, the Rav was learning with a bunch of students, and the phone rang, and of course, Oh, the phone rang, and the Rav gets up, and he goes to the next room, and he picks it up, and he starts speaking on the phone on Yom Tov. And the Rav comes back, and he sees the students. Of course, they're a little surprised. What's the Rav doing? The Rav is not like Rabbi Rakin. Rabbi Rakin held that you can talk on the phone on Yom Tov. The Rav didn't hold this. But he told them the story as follows, that in the morning, before he went to shul, the telephone was ringing, just kept ringing, and they wouldn't answer it. After davening, they came back home. In the middle of lunch, a non-Jewish neighbor rings the doorbell, and he tells them that he has a telegram for Soloveitchik. And Soloveitchik says to him, we don't open it, so they understood what he opened the telegram, and the telegram said, answer the phone, Chaim Heller. And what was the story? The Chaim Heller was in Lakewood over Yom Tov, and he became quite ill, and the doctor says he immediately needs to have an operation, and he did not want to have this operation without consulting with Rav Soloveitchik. So the telegram, so Rav Soloveitchik was speaking to Rav Chaim Heller, and that was regarded as, I don't know if on Yom Tov it has to be B'ruach Nefesh, but it was a serious matter, and that's the story that Bill told. Furthermore, in Neged Givot Olam on page 101, he records, this is Rabbi Shurkin, or Michael Shurkin, also a student of the Rav, that the Vilna Gaon held that about a certain tzaddik, I guess maybe more than one, you could violate Shabbos to get a bracha from him. And Rav Moshe Feinstein himself, in the Igros Moshe, volume 8, Orach Chaim, number 16, says that you can write a kameya on Shabbos if you're worried that without it the person will die. In other words, if the person feels that he needs this kameya, you can do it. And the last thing I'll mention, Rav Nachum Rabinovich, in his Tshuvot Siach Nachum, he goes even further. He says that social workers are allowed to travel on Shabbos if there's a terrorist attack, if they could, because the trauma is such, it's the equivalent of a chola sheyesh bo sakana, and he cites the Rashba, that the Rashba says, to say that you can also write a kameya on Shabbos for a chola sheyesh bo sakana, or for a woman who just gave birth, to calm her. And that was what I suggested, that could possibly be a permission. Okay, so now I have no other things in my pile until everyone else sends me more stuff. So let's pick up. Got my sign here. We were in the middle, if you remember, we're talking about Israel Jacobson and David Friedland, or reformers. The last thing I was talking about was Israel Jacobson in Zizit, his synagogue there. And he says as follows: why create a reform service? He says, quote, who would dare deny that our service is sickly because of many useless things? That is, you're saying all this stuff in the prayers that are useless. I don't know what he considers useless and what's not.
Do you know what type of lizard this is?
I'm not sure, but I think for him, maybe
he's
only
scary
Shema
looking.
And a reform version of Shema Esrei would be valuable. I don't know. And then he goes on, this has degenerated into a thoughtless recitation of prayers and formulae.
Yeah. He's got me cornered. Looks like a dinosaur.
Is the blue cone?
I don't know. He's just scaring me.
Just stand back.
He looks like 10 million years old. And there's a littler one as well. There's one that's like smaller, like a baby. So maybe this is the father and the mother, and then they've got a baby.
You're the grandfather.
I'm the grandfather. I'm the grandfather of dragons.
Oh. We can move, that's important.
He doesn't look starving either, does he?
Yeah.
They're well fed. It's giving me the evil eye.
Is another or
Yeah, there's a
very
little.
young one? Because he has colors and so forth.
They don't seem nervous, do they?
No. Stress it, thing they don't understand. Have a nice day.
Take care. Bye. It's not bad being the father of dragons. What should we name this bloke? I presume this is the Sheila. And this is the bloke. I think that Mark Shapiro's teachings have a calming effect on them.
That it kills devotion more than it encourages it, and that it limits our religious principles to that fund of knowledge which for centuries has remained in our treasure house without increase and without ennoblement. So he says it kills devotion. It's a faultless recitation of prayers and formulae. Now, this is something obviously the Orthodox struggle with as well. No one can deny that people, as I said, it's the routinization. So the Orthodox, though, have to do their own way of trying to make it. We don't cut things out unless they're like matters that are not really essential to the davening.
I'm in his territory where he keeps his females.
What is that? Do you know?
No, a dragon.
And me as well.
Yeah, and there's a littler one. I'm wondering if this is the father, mother, and baby.
They're very brave, eh? They're not scared of us.
Yeah. They look well fed, they're not starving, are they? They eat well. I think that neck blows out when he needs to. I don't know why. He can make himself look really scary with it. Don't they look like dinosaurs?
Yeah, like mini dinosaurs.
Yeah, like a relic from the past. Oh, geez. I hope they're not poisonous.
I think he's looking at you. His next little bite.
I hope I'm still here when you come back. What do you want, mate? Am I on your territory, buddy?
But the thing with the reformers is they often had a good diagnosis of what was going on. Their solutions were the problems. But of course, there's a diagnosis that the people find certain aspects of the service long and boring, and we've made changes when we could. I've said it numerous times. Just look at the Tisha B'Av that you have today and compare that to when we were growing up, where I'd sit in show for as a youngster, hours and hours listening to keynotes. What's a 12 or 13-year-old? Just read them again and again. So now we've made changes. So, but that's there's halachic principles as well. But the reformers are not so concerned about that. And then he says that these prayers have remained in our treasure houses without increase or ennoblement. That is, we have to change the prayers because we can't recite prayers the same way they've been recited for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. We need some changes. Now, I just want to take back a bit what I said, that in terms of make it seem it's only the reformers, because there's a video of an interview. There's a guy, he deals with high school kids. I can find it, I forget his name. And he interviews with Herschel Schechter. And he says that at a lot of our high schools, the kids come in and they don't want to daven. They don't come from such religious homes, or they're teenagers. Teenagers, they're not so into it often. So Rav Schechter says to him, so then they don't have to daven all this. And I don't know if the person was a little surprised. He says, so what should they do? So Schechter says, okay, he says, cut out this because of the Sukkot Zimmer. I think he says, do Rosh Hashanah and then go to Ashrei, and then I think he says, then go to Birchos Kriya Shema. In other words, he cuts out. So it's like a 15-minute or even less, 10-minute davening. And this is not some reformer. This is what Schechter saying. For these kids, it's better to say a few things with kavana than to have them sit there the whole time so they're born out of their minds. So by the time they get to the Shema, they're still thinking of the sports game from the night before. They've been thinking for the last 10 minutes. So this is, the post-take for Schechter saying that, for those people, we're not talking about a shul here. A shul's problematic, but for the high school kids, and you can have, I guess, different minyanim. You can have the minyan for the kids who want to do everything and the kids who aren't up to it. And I found that interesting that Rav Schechter said that.
I didn't know. I wish I did.
I think it's called a frill. It hasn't got a frill around its neck, so it's not a frilled neck lizard. I think it's I used to live in Australia. I should know this. Komodo dragon.
Komodo dragon.
Yes.
Okay. Are they poisonous?
No, but they have sharp claws. So if they run towards you, you lie on the ground, because then they'll just go over you. They won't try and crawl up. And there's poison in the claws.
Poison in the claws.
Yeah.
Great. Great. I can't wait.
You can do. Oh, there's the female. That's the female.
Okay.
So you better not get between the two of them.
I don't think I want to come between them.
Where are you from?
Originally here, but California
Okay.
mainly.
Yeah, she's looking at us saying, what are you doing?
Komodo dragon. It's not a Komodo dragon. Water dragon, beauty dragon. Don't look forward to them getting their claws on me. A single dragon can ruin your whole day. There they go. Just a frilled neck lizard. And the Agama family, you can tell by the head. Don't they look like dinosaurs? Wonder what they've come to. What they've come to teach us. Maybe they have a message.
You might be thinking, that, well, we've added a great deal to Judaism in recent years, but from Jacobson's point, nothing is new. Everything just comes out of the same old sources. And since we're living in a different era, as we'll see, we need entirely new conceptions. And if we're bound to Jewish law, then there's going to be limits to what we can do. So people like Jacobson aren't going to be happy. Now, Jacobson also was concerned with fitting in. Remember, at the synagogue, the inauguration was full of non-Jews, and they too joined into the singing and everything. I can tell you that at the inauguration of the shul that I go to, there were also non-Jews at the inauguration. The mayor was there, the assembly people, and they didn't speak, but they sat. Actually, I should say that the mayor spoke. But the rest of them just sat there. I remember the mayor spoke. He spoke very ecumenical.
So Australian Eastern Water Dragon. Is that the consensus? Is that the science? I want to fit in with the science here.
Medically about all our houses of worship and everything, and very nice. But we didn't have psalms or hymns that we sang together with them. But Jacobson says as follows. He says that parts of the Jewish prayer service and the rituals are offensive to reason. That is, they offend us. So we say things that we don't accept, we don't believe in. And then he says as well, also to our Christian friends.
So Mark Shapiro is this great scholar, a great academic, and I was taken aback when I listened to one of his lectures where he talked about how he's kind of offended that there was this Reformed Jewish day school named after Rashi. And he didn't think that Rashi was a good representative of Reformed Judaism. But Rashi was a 12th, 13th century Jewish commentator, wrote commentaries on the Talmud and on the Torah. But I think it all depends on where you're coming from. Like Mark Shapiro has been modern Orthodox his whole life. So from his modern Orthodox perspective, Rashi is not a good representative of Reformed Judaism. But if you believe that Reformed Judaism is true, you can certainly look at Rashi's life and say, oh yeah, it does kind of reflect Reformed Judaism. So it's kind of taken aback when Mark said he was offended by the idea of a Reformed Jewish day school named, the Rashi School. I am 56 years of age. I've never been offended in my life, so the name of the school is not going to offend me.
So this is going to be driving reform also, that they need to fit in, not just in their understanding of what it means to be a modern person, but they don't want to do things that non-Jews will look at and say, well, that's retrograde or that's backwards. Later, in his speech at the inauguration, speaking to the Christians, he says, quote, there is nothing in this new temple that in any way contradicts the principles of pure religion, of the demands of general morality, of reason.
Okay, so pure religion according to whom? So this is 19th century Germany, which is largely Protestant, right? So Protestantism is a religion of the heart, a religion of creed, of dogma, of theology, of faith, right? So pure religion from a Protestant perspective is faith. But pure religion from a Catholic or a Jewish perspective, it is behavior, it is ritual, it is community.
Of your humanitarian attitude. Of course, we today in 2022, we would never say to the non-Jews if the dedication of our shul, there's nothing that we do in here that's in opposition to your humanitarianism, and we wouldn't feel the need to say that everything we do in here is in accord with pure religion, with general morality. That we assume that everyone knows that synagogues were interested in morality. But you see that in the early part of the 19th century, he needs to stress that we're not different than you. We too are moral, and we're not, this synagogue, unlike those other synagogues, is a synagogue where a Christian can come and feel brotherhood with the Jews because we all are worshiping the one true God. You won't.
So, right, you want to join forces with some other group, or emphasize that you're not a threat to some other group when you're in the inferior position. When you feel safe and secure, then you have less desire to form bonds and assure them that you're not a threat. So when Jews were very much the minority in Germany and felt concerned and afraid, they wanted to make the argument that they weren't a threat. But in the United States, Jews feel secure and safe and powerful, and they don't feel the same need to placate Christians that they did in 19th century Germany. It's like the war between religion and science. Now, religious leaders are very intent on saying there's no contradiction between religion and science. That's because science has won all those battles. And so this is a way for religious leaders to give up the fight that they were losing.
You won't find in this synagogue any of that Orthodox mumbo jumbo and superstition. I do want to add, however, that many people are probably thinking when you hear this, that's so reformed, be concerned with the Bible. Always what the Goyim have to say. And we're going to modify our service and we're going to change our practices because of the Goyim. And I have to say that there is a lot of truth to that feeling, but it's not complete without pointing out that we have plenty of examples where Orthodox or Torah leaders, because I don't want to use the word Orthodox, I'm speaking about, let's say, in medieval times, they're not Orthodox. There's no such thing as Orthodoxy yet. We haven't even got to Orthodoxy. Maybe with the Chasam Sofer, we'll start seeing Orthodoxy, right? We just have Torah Judaism and Reform Judaism, traditional Torah Judaism and Reform Judaism, because we have a number of examples. I'll just give you some of them now, where poskim, Torah leaders have said that because of how things look to the Goyim, we should not do it. And let me give you a few examples. I should have asked Rabbi Tassani about this a couple weeks ago, the chief rabbi of Rome. In Rome, before the mid-19th century, one of the practices they used to do was they would drag the coffin of rabbis, only rabbis. They would drag the coffin, and this was thought to be a form of penitence. This is based on the idea that Chizkiyahu, to give penance to his wicked father, dragged his father's bones. So they would drag the coffin, and this created problems because the non-Jews look at this. This is, and then they dumped it into they didn't let it down nicely into the grave. They'd actually push it in, and this was like skill.
Okay, so when that awful day comes that I will pass on from this world, really don't want you to drag my body through the streets, right? So don't treat me like a great rabbi. No, I'll be fine with just a traditional service.
This was like the punishment of stoning. Throw someone off a high roof or something. And in fact, the tzaddikim in Rome would do all four types of punishments after their death. There was a whole formula they did as a form of penitence. Now this created negative feelings among the non-Jewish Romans. Can you imagine? They see the people dragging the coffin through the streets.
Okay, so now that I've converted to Judaism, I've largely forgotten how the non-Jew thinks. Would you be offended if you saw a bunch of Jews like dragging a dead body or a coffin of some revered leader, through the streets? Would that bother you?
The thing is, however, was that this was only done for the sages. And they only did it every 40, 50 years once. So it wasn't such a big deal. But nevertheless, it was mocked during the carnival performances in Rome. And in fact, for over 200 years, the Jews of Rome asked the various popes to forbid the performances where they used to mock the Jewish funeral practices. And it was finally abolished by the Jews in the 19th century because they had a rabbi there. He was the Rav of Rome. He wasn't from Rome. He was from Eretz Yisrael. He came to Rome. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan. And he wrote a volume of Tshuvot, a very interesting volume called the Krach Shel Romi. Rabbi Professor Jose Faur has a whole book on Yisrael Moshe Chazan, a very fascinating figure. Well, if you look at his responsa, number 13, he talks about how, contrary to what the general minhag was, a simple person, Chazan calls him Pashut Echad, a simple person, said he also wanted to be given the Daled Misos based it. He also wanted to be given the 4 mitot and to be dragged. I have to look in the tshuva. As I remember, you drag in the coffin. You're not dragged by yourself. I'm going to look, though, because now I'm thinking of it. That would be even worse if you actually drag the body. But I'm pretty certain that that's my recollection, that they drag the coffin, not the body. Because they do bury coffins in Rome. Now, this is, again, going to be a problem. You're going to drag him into the cemetery, which goes to the non-Jewish neighborhoods. And Rabbi Shlomo Moshe Chazan says, when we did it with the big rabbis, it was a very uncommon thing. But now,
So on Purim, which comes from the book of Esther, like in some Jewish communities, they hang up effigies of Haman and his sons. And so a lot of the non-Jews don't appreciate, the hanging of effigies in their neighborhood.
Well, you have simple people who want to do this. And that's going to create a mockery for Judaism. We now have good relations with the Christians. Can you imagine what that's going to do when they see us dragging, dead people through the streets? It's going to make us, he says, seem like barbarians in their eyes. And therefore, he abolishes it. Is this a valid concern? Are we supposed to alter our practices because of the non-Jews? We don't stop doing mitzvot because of the non-Jews, but there are other sources I found similarly. So,
There never gets to be a time when you can just ignore how your behavior is going to be received by other people. Right? You can never be so secure, so successful, so strong, so happy that you can just be completely oblivious to how outsiders view what you're doing. Right? So if you form any sort of connections with a group, it's going to take on some cult-like behaviors. So the way to transcend this is to keep one foot in your group, but also consider how things look for an outsider. And so here's the baby, another lizard on the run, another dragon in the making. Man, this place is just teeming with them.
so for instance, the Rashbash. The Rashbash is Shlomo ben Shimon Duran, 15th century. 15th century Algeria. He responds to a community where the minhag was when you went into the shul, you took off your shoes. We know that's what they did outside the cities, for example, in the villages. They did that. Did they get this from the Muslims? That this was a sign of respect? It could be. I can tell you that right now in Germany. And by the way, I'm going back to Germany the week after Shavuos. I gotta get our trip. God willing, one day we'll go. I gotta plan it. I was going to announce to everyone one day that we're the first kosher tour from America ever going to Germany. But lo and behold, my friend there, my contact, told me, I spoke to him last week, the group just left, a group of Hasidim, 17 Hasidim, showed up in Tunisia last week, and they're the first kosher tour. And in their whole garb and everything, the Hasidim there. But I can tell you that in every single shul in Germany, when you go up to the Aron Kodesh, I had the kavod of taking out the Torah one, but you have to take your shoes off. And in the famous shul in Germany, the Griba shul, the big one there, everyone takes their shoes off before you go in the shul. So you're all davening in the shul. Well, it doesn't matter.
So that's pretty rare that you have to take your shoes off to enter a synagogue, right? I've never encountered that.
And when you come as a tourist, you have to take your shoes off too. So the whole shul for thousands of years, you've been taking your shoes off there. So it's not a, I think it's Rav Chaim Kanievsky, actually. Or the site word. No, it's Rav Chaim Kanievsky. He was asked about the practice of taking your shoes off, and he says it's like from the Goyim. But it's not. We have it in Morocco. We know that they used to do it. Well, maybe originally it's from the Goyim, but I mean, it's been a Jewish practice for so long that it's a valid Jewish practice. So, but he was asked about this, the Rashbash. Now, there was a shul where some people insisted on taking your shoes off, and other people said, no, you can't take your shoes off because this is, again, you're imitating the Goyim.
Look at the neck of this thing. You beauty.
And what does the Rashbash say? And this is, there's a few different direct.
So now we get to see both lizards in the frame.
But these are major, major poskim. He says you should take off your shoes. And he says, precisely by taking off your shoes, you'll gain respect by the non-Jews. Because for the Muslims, the idea of going to your house of worship and not taking off your shoes was a sign of disrespect. So
Okay, so if we take off our shoes at synagogue, will that gain more respect from the non-Jews asking for a friend?
So it's not like taking off your shoes is against halacha. There's good reasons to take off your shoes, you could argue, and therefore, now you can never imagine a post-Second Christian man saying this, take off your shoes. They would see this as completely disrespectful, take off your shoes. Take off your shoes when you go to shul, that's the height of disrespect. But in the Muslim world, on the contrary, you have to have a good reason not to take off your shoes, because in that world, it was thought to be respectful to take your shoes off. You know that the Rambam says that before davening, you're supposed to wash your feet? And the Raivad on the spot there, Hillis Tefillah, says, "What's going on here? Why would you wash your feet?" He doesn't. So it's a very different understanding. The Rambam is a famous example. Take a look in the Chuvas Rambam, the Blau edition, number 258. That's the Chuva where he deals with the practice of no chazaras Hashabbos. And this continues in certain in Spanish and Portuguese. They don't do this on Shabbos and Musaf. You read it together, that is, you restart the Shemona Esrei at Musaf. Only at Musaf, as I recall, they do this out loud, and then you get to Kedusha, and then everyone continue on your own. What about the Hecha Kedusha? Yeshivas do it sometimes. This was standard in Morocco.
Okay, I think that'll do it for now. Bye-bye.